Got a few big books. I don't know why I sung there, but I have a few big books to share with you. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a big book summer TBR, that kind of thing, and then I realized, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. So I'm a little late to the game, but this is my big book summer read and to be read, like, announcement or whatever. So if you don't know what Big Book Summer is, this is a reading event that's gone on for quite a few years, but I feel like in the last couple of years has really taken off, which I think is awesome. And it's just an event that's to encourage people to read big books over the summer when a lot of us have a bit more time. So there are a lot of different elements that you can do to it, but at its heart, it's pretty simple. I will include a link to the announcement video in the description box below if you want to learn more about the specifics of this. But today I'm just going to talk about big books that I would recommend, as well as what my plans are, at least for the month of July and going forward. Now, Big Book Summer, like I said, at its heart is pretty simple. It's just from Memorial Day in the US to Labor Day. You are to read at least one big book, and a big book is considered a book that is 400 pages or larger. Now, if you know me and you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I like big books. So I'm going to start out by talking about the ones that I've read. I'm not going to talk about every big book I've read so far this year because I haven't enjoyed all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you first all the big books that I read just this year so far that I really enjoyed. So these are all 4 stars or higher. Some of them are 5 stars, some of them 4.5. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through them in order. I'm not going to say a lot about them because I have reviewed all of these this year on my channel. So I will include a link to my playlist of currently readings, or maybe I'll even try and find the specific videos that I talk about them in and link those in the description box below in case you want a bigger review and to know why I liked these particular books. But let's just go ahead and get to it. The first one I'm going to talk about is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time. This is a work of science fiction. It is about what happens when basically the world is devastated and no longer inhabitable, and the last remains of the human race board a ship to try and find a habitable planet. Now, they know that there's potentially some out there because at one point humans had a project where they were seeding different planets and making them habitable for humans, and also running an experiment to see, what kind of human evolution and life could grow on those planets. So the people of this ship, I want to call it the Wayfarer, but I'm pretty sure that's not correct. Gosh, I can't remember the name of this ship. Anyway, the Gilgamesh? Was that it? Wow, too many names going through my head. Anyway, they travel on their way through space looking for this planet. They come across one that seems like it would be the perfect place, but it's already been terraformed and things go on from there. I really enjoyed this book. It was like a 4.5, 5-star read for me. I still think about it and some of the ideas in here. So this is science fiction. It is set in space, and I think it's a really good work if you like your science fiction to give you a lot to think about philosophically, not necessarily getting bogged down in scientifically how everything is working. Though there's just enough of that I also liked that aspect of it. And I'll be honest, this focuses more on like the science of biology and human evolution and that kind of thing, more than on the technology of the ship and, portals and anything along those lines. It's also significantly longer than 400 pages. It's around 600 some odd pages. Let's see if I have any more science fiction on here. No, I do not. Okay, we'll move on into historical fiction in case that's something you enjoy and want to read more of. I read Kintu earlier this year. This is a book that is set in Uganda, and it is, I don't want to say it's a reimagining of Ugandans' origins, but it starts with the origins of the Ugandan people, and then you get to see how this all plays out in basically a multi-generational family story. It is told in a really unique and interesting way and goes back and forth a little bit in time, and it's going to take you a while to figure out what's going on, but each section of this book, I think it's told in like 6 parts, is really good and tells the story of a different family member across a few decades. And I promise you, if you just stick with it until the end, that it's all going to come together and it's going to be so well worth it. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars and I would definitely reread it. I have two other works of historical fiction. One of them is Palace Walk. This is book one in the Cairo trilogy. This is another historical fiction family saga, multi-generational story. It is set in Egypt. In this first story, we are introduced to the father and the mother and their young children, and it is a really close-up look at family life in Egypt during the 1920s, I think is when we start here. And I really enjoyed this book. The rest of the series is pretty good as well. The author does a really good job of wrapping things up in this one book. So you could just read book one and feel like you got a comprehensive idea of what the family is like. This is a really good work of historical fiction if you want a really close-up look at what life was like inside Muslim families during this particular time period in Egypt. I think it was a really good book to start with, and I honestly think you could read just this book and not continue on with the series if you prefer to do that. I will say right now that book 2 and 3, which I also finished this year, I did not give 4 stars to. I felt like the tone and the writing style really shifted in a direction that I personally didn't prefer, but it might work for you, so they're definitely worth giving a try. The last work of historical fiction I have to talk about is Native Son by Richard Wright. This is another really good read, one of my favorites of the year for sure, and I really liked this book. I liked the way he examined what happened to the main character. It is definitely a character study if that's something that you like. If you have thought about reading Crime and Punishment, or you have read Crime and Punishment, or you just like the idea of reading a book that gets inside the mind of somebody who has committed a crime, this is an excellent book. The reason I mention Crime and Punishment is because Richard Wright was very inspired by Dostoevsky and his writing and that story in particular, and there are a lot of parallels between that book and this. Personally, I liked Native Son better, which is why you will not see Crime and Punishment on this list, even though that is also over 400 pages long. If you would like to read something from the ancient world, I read 2 books this year and I really enjoyed both of them. They are from similar-ish time periods and one is older than the other. The first one I'm going to talk about is pretty well known. That is the Odyssey. There is a film of this coming out sometime this year, probably later this summer. So this is a great time to read or reread the Odyssey if you haven't read it before. I really enjoyed the Robert Fitzgerald translation, which is this one. There were some good notes and I found it very approachable and pretty easy to read. One of the things that I would suggest is to look up what the conventions are of epic poetry before reading this book, because I think that'll help answer some questions you might have about why the Odyssey is written the way it is. 9 times out of 10, the answer is just going to be because it's epic poetry and that's how they wrote epic poetry. This is in verse format, so even though it's over 400 pages, it reads pretty quickly and it's not like super poetic or anything like that. So if you're worried about feeling like you're going to be reading poetry, it does read and feel like a story. And I'd highly recommend it if you haven't tried it before or haven't tried it in a while. The other work that I had that is from the ancient world is also based on an epic poem. That would be the Epic of Gilgamesh, but this is a fantasy retelling, so it is a novel that came out recently, and that is Inanna. Now, you might have expected it to be called Gilgamesh, but Inanna is a part of the Sumerian trilogy, which is a 3-book trilogy, and the book 1 in this, Inanna, it actually retells the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or at least a good chunk of the Epic of Gilgamesh is included in book 1 of this. And the other thing that I really like about this author is that at least in book 2, and maybe in the introduction of this book, she does include a section where she talks about what is actually from the epic or Sumerian mythology and what is the stuff that she added to the story. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was a great fantasy retelling. I thought it was very different than your typical Greek and Roman ones, and so I would definitely give this book a try if you're interested. Do check your content warnings though, because Sumerian mythology is, let's say, more questionable than most people find Greek mythology. If you can believe it. And then the final book that I read, which is also a work of fantasy, but was a really fun and lighthearted read, well, kind of, sort of, but was more charming in other ways, I guess, is Watership Down by Richard Adams. I read this earlier this year, and I really liked this book. The only thing I wish I had known going in was that he originally told this book as stories to his daughter on long car rides, and the book kind of felt like that. It had multiple climaxes and resolutions, and so I felt like I was reading a series that was bound up in one book. So this book is told in a couple of different parts. My recommendation would be to treat them like separate books and read them like multiple books in a series, because I think it'll make more sense of how the plotting and the story is done. It's really good. You can get audiobooks of this and everything. So if you're looking for something like that, that would be my recommendation. It is about bunnies trying to make their way to a new land, but do be warned, it does get a little like dark and sad at multiple times throughout the entire narrative, but it is a good book. And then finally, just getting to my TBR for July, I do have one big book that I plan on reading in the month of July. Now I have a couple on my TBR, so you could go and watch my TBR game for the month of July and see what those are, but the one that I know I'm going to get to is David Copperfield. This is going to be a reread for me. This is hands down the largest book I'm talking about today. It's almost 900 pages long, so it would also count for March of the Mammoths, but I am reading it this summer and it's going to be probably my biggest book of the summer. So if you have not read this, it is a coming of age story. It's my favorite coming of age story, and it really is a delightful read, and it's something you could easily take the whole summer to read and just sit there and spend your summer with David Copperfield, and I think you will find that you quite enjoy the experience. That is it. I think the only books that I haven't mentioned that I've read this year are the ones that I read in June, so you can go check those out, but my battery's gonna die, so I'm gonna say goodbye for now. Let me know what big books you're reading, and I'll talk to you next time.